I never believed in forbidden attraction, until I found myself alone with her, and my heart couldn't breathe. The café was quiet that late morning, sunlight spilling through the tall windows and catching the dust motes that floated lazily in the air. I had chosen a corner table by the window, laptop open, headphones half on, pretending to work while my mind wandered. That's when I noticed her. She walked in with an ease I couldn't name, confident, graceful. Yet there was a vulnerability in the way she paused just inside the door, as if weighing the moment before fully stepping in. She had this quiet presence that made the bustling café fade around her. The kind of presence that makes you look, even when you know you shouldn't. Her hair caught the sunlight, a subtle shimmer of chestnut with soft streaks of silver at the temples. She tucked a loose strand behind her ear, and I couldn't help but notice the delicate curve of her fingers, the faint tremor of hesitation, the way she held herself upright yet relaxed. I looked away, embarrassed that I had stared for longer than polite. But the pull lingered. When she ordered her coffee, her voice was warm, calm, the kind of sound that leaves a gentle echo in your chest. I caught the faintest scent of her perfume, something floral yet earthy, lingering in the space she occupied. A scent that clung to memory the way a half-remembered song does. Then, almost by accident, our eyes met. She smiled. Just a small, polite curve of her lips. But it was enough to make my chest tighten. Enough to make the air feel suddenly heavier, richer, almost electric. I returned the smile, awkward, unsure, aware of the inexplicable warmth creeping into my stomach. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense, not like something from a movie or a book, but something softer, slower, more insistent. She chose a table near mine, a casual decision that felt anything but casual. She settled, pulling out a notebook, flipping the pages with a careful deliberation. I watched, fascinated by the rhythm of her movements, the way she paused mid-sentence to sip her coffee, the brief, almost imperceptible sigh as she set the cup down. I tried to focus on my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard, but my thoughts betrayed me. Every glance I stole toward her made my pulse a little faster. Every accidental catch of her I sent a flutter of nerves through me. There was something in the quiet steadiness of her, something that contrasted with my restless energy, that made me ache in a way I didn't understand. Before I knew it, I had noticed everything. The curve of her jaw as she tilted her head, the warmth of her hand as she brushed crumbs from the table, the faint laugh that escaped when she muttered something under her breath at a page in her notebook. And then, almost reluctantly, she looked up again. Our eyes met for a moment longer this time. I could swear there was recognition there, though we had never spoken. It was fleeting, delicate, and impossibly charged with something unspoken. It was strange how life seemed to conspire to bring us together. I first saw her at the café, and then, as if by some quiet design, I kept noticing her elsewhere. The bookstore, with its comforting scent of paper and ink, became our second meeting place. I had gone there seeking solitude among the shelves. Yet there she was, turning a corner, her fingers grazing the spines of novels with a careful deliberation that made her look both poised and approachable. Our first words were simple, almost banal. "I've read that one. It's remarkable," I said, gesturing to the book she held. Her eyes lit up in a way that made my chest tighten, the faintest smile curving her lips. "Really? I wasn't sure if it would be too heavy," she replied, her voice calm, warm, and inviting. That short exchange lingered in my mind long after she had moved on to another aisle. It became a small, unspoken game, accidental encounters that never felt accidental. At the park, she would be sitting on a bench under the winter sunlight, sketchbook in hand, the lines of her body relaxed but deliberate. I'd pretend to jog past, but my eyes betrayed me. She noticed, of course. One day, she waved, and the flutter in my chest was so sudden it nearly knocked me off my feet. Each brief interaction drew me in deeper. Her gestures fascinated me. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear absent-mindedly, the soft tilt of her head when she was listening, the way she sometimes paused mid-step to observe the world around her. I noticed details that seemed insignificant but weren't. The delicate curve of her fingers as she held a coffee cup, the way her scarf slipped slightly off one shoulder, the warmth that radiated from her presence even in the coldest winter air. And then there was the laughter. Subtle, quiet, but undeniably hers. It lingered in the spaces between words, leaving traces of warmth that I could almost feel as I walked home. I began to anticipate it, to seek it out in crowded rooms and quiet streets alike. The first real touch, or what I thought might be a touch, came in the bookstore. We reached for the same book at the same time, hands brushing lightly, almost teasingly. My pulse spiked, a warm, unfamiliar tingle spreading from my fingers to my chest. She laughed softly, eyes sparkling with amusement and something else. Something I couldn't yet name. She didn't pull away, and neither did I, savoring the brief contact that seemed to stretch just a heartbeat too long. By the end of the week, I realized it wasn't just coincidence that brought us together. There was a pull between us, subtle yet undeniable, the kind of tension that didn't need words to be understood. I found myself replaying our small encounters in my mind, smiling at moments that, in any other context, might have seemed mundane. And somewhere in the quiet corners of my heart, I admitted it. I was captivated, not just by her beauty or grace, but by the way she seemed to exist in the world. Confident yet quietly vulnerable, present yet mysterious. It was one of those sudden spring showers that seemed to appear out of nowhere. I was walking to the café, trying to lose myself in music through my headphones, when the rain started, light at first, then insistent enough that I had to duck under the awning. That's when I saw her, standing there with a small umbrella that barely covered her, hair damp at the edges, a faint crease of worry on her brow. Without thinking, I stepped forward. "You'll get soaked if you stay out there," I said, fumbling to offer my own umbrella. She looked at me, startled for a moment, and then a slow smile spread across her face, warm, genuine. The kind that made your chest ache in a way that's both sweet and painful. "Thank you," she said softly, stepping closer so our umbrellas overlapped. The space between us shrank just enough for me to notice the subtle warmth of her shoulder brushing mine. A soft, accidental contact that sent a jolt through me I didn't expect. The rain pattered above, creating a private rhythm for the quiet moment we shared. We decided to wait out the storm in the café. She ordered a cappuccino, and I found myself sliding into the chair across from her, trying to appear casual while my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. Conversation started cautiously, small talk about the weather and favorite cafes. But slowly, gently, she opened a little more, revealing glimpses of her life without oversharing. Her struggle with a project at work, a fleeting worry about family matters, the way she sometimes felt caught between responsibility and longing for freedom. I listened, genuinely absorbed, offering quiet encouragement and small observations. She laughed at a joke I didn't even think was funny, and I realized I didn't care. The sound itself was enough. She noticed the way I leaned in slightly when she spoke, and she returned the gesture, subtly closing the distance between us without words, without needing to. There was a moment when she picked up her cup, fingers brushing my hand. It was fleeting, almost accidental, but I felt it like electricity tracing along my skin. My chest tightened, my mind raced, and yet I felt a calm settle over me, a strange comfort in the shared space between us. There was trust in that touch, quiet and unspoken, the kind that builds slowly, almost imperceptibly. As the rain eased outside, we stayed, talking about books, movies, and small, personal quirks that revealed more than either of us intended. Her eyes held something I hadn't noticed before, a softness, a quiet vulnerability beneath the elegance and confidence. I realized I was not just drawn to her presence, but to the trust she was offering, the unguarded way she allowed me into her world for just a little while. It started subtly, the way these things always do, the creeping awareness that I was thinking of her more than I should. At first, it was harmless. Remembering the sound of her laugh, the way sunlight caught the edges of her hair, or how her fingers brushed her coffee cup with absent-minded elegance. But gradually, these thoughts became persistent, inescapable, and unsettling in the most exhilarating way. I found myself pausing in the middle of my day, replaying our encounters, the accidental touch in the bookstore, the shared umbrella during the rainstorm, the quiet laughter over cappuccinos. Every detail had become vivid, sharpened by memory. The warmth of her shoulder when it brushed mine, the faint perfume that lingered in the air after she left, the way her eyes seemed to hold unspoken questions. My chest would tighten at the recollection, a strange ache that was equal parts thrill and fear. Fear, yes. There was the age difference, impossible to ignore now that my feelings had started to take shape. I was aware of it in every glance I stole at her, every hesitation before speaking. Society's expectations loomed in the back of my mind, whispering doubts I didn't want but couldn't silence. What if I was reading too much into our encounters? What if my admiration bordered on obsession? Yet, despite the hesitation, I sensed that she was aware too. Small gestures, the way she would linger a moment longer when our eyes met, the subtle tilt of her head when listening to me speak, the quiet laugh she reserved only for me, hinted at something unspoken. And yet, like me, she held back. There was a mutual restraint, a silent negotiation of boundaries that felt both frustrating and tantalizing. I caught myself imagining scenarios that would never occur. Sitting next to her on a park bench, sharing a quiet meal, laughing in the kitchen as she passed me a plate of cookies she had baked. My heart raced at these thoughts, yet I held back, aware that some things were better nurtured slowly, like embers hidden beneath a gentle ash. One evening, as I walked past the café where we first met, I saw her through the window, alone, sketching something in her notebook. The soft light of the setting sun caught the curve of her jaw, the grace in her movements, and I realized with a start that I was no longer just captivated. I was drawn to her in a way I hadn't anticipated, in a way that made the world feel both larger and impossibly small at the same time. I wanted to reach out, to speak, to close the distance between us, but my feet froze. Hesitation gripped me, not from a lack of desire, but from an acute awareness of the stakes. Emotions, reputation, expectations, and the fragile beauty of what we had begun to share. And in that frozen moment, I understood something crucial. Attraction alone was not enough. Patience, respect, and careful attention would be required if this connection, so quietly intense, so impossibly tender, was to have a chance. The slow burn between us had begun, and I knew that letting it unfold naturally, even with hesitation, was the only way to honor what was forming. It was one of those rare, golden afternoons when the world seemed to slow just enough for quiet intimacy to exist. I had been invited to her home under the pretext of helping her organize some old books. A mundane task, she insisted, but the thought of being in her personal space sent a flutter of anticipation through me that I could hardly control. Her home was warm, filled with light that streamed lazily through tall windows, painting the hardwood floors in soft amber. The faint scent of vanilla and something floral lingered in the air, subtle and comforting. She moved around with ease, placing books gently on shelves, her fingers grazing the spines with a deliberate care that reminded me of the attention she gave every small gesture in her life. We talked as we worked, our conversation flowing naturally from novels to music, from memories of childhood trips to shared frustrations about work. There was a rhythm to it, a gentle ebb and flow that made silences feel comfortable instead of awkward. At one point, she laughed softly at a story I told, her eyes lighting up in a way that made my chest tighten. It was intimate without being intrusive, playful without losing the delicate tension that had always existed between us. At some point, we ended up sitting on the floor among piles of books, knees nearly touching. I could feel the warmth radiating from her side, subtle but unmistakable, and for a moment, I caught myself mesmerized by the way the sunlight caught the strands of her hair. She didn't move away, and I didn't either. There was a shared understanding in that quiet proximity, a trust that had been built gradually, almost imperceptibly, over our past encounters. Our hands brushed occasionally as we passed books to one another, each touch brief but laden with unspoken acknowledgement. A laugh, a smile, the faint pressure of a hand against mine. All of it felt charged with a tenderness that neither of us dared to name aloud. The rhythm of our shared space became a language of its own, subtle and deliberate, revealing more than words could. At one point, she handed me a cup of tea, and as our fingers met, I noticed the warmth of her hand lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. I felt a quiet jolt of awareness. The pulse in my chest quickened, a thrill that was neither urgent nor reckless, just honest and human. She caught my glance and smiled, not teasingly, but with the gentle reassurance of someone who had noticed too, someone who understood. Time seemed to slow as the afternoon stretched into evening. We moved through shared stories, quiet laughter, and small touches, all underscored by a sense of ease and trust. There was no need for declarations, no need to rush. The intimacy existed in the gentle brush of her hand, the warmth of her presence beside me, the soft cadence of her voice as she spoke about ordinary things. As I left that day, walking away with a heart full of both longing and contentment, I realized something profound. The connection we were building wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It was about quiet moments alone, small gestures, and the patient unfolding of a bond that promised something rare, something enduring, and undeniably tender. The evening was quiet, the kind of silence that feels almost sacred. We had taken a long walk through the park, the fading light casting a golden glow across the bare branches and the still waters of the fountain. The world had narrowed until it was just the two of us, our footsteps soft on the path, our breaths mingling with the cool air. I was acutely aware of her presence beside me, the subtle warmth radiating from her as she walked, the gentle sway of her scarf in the evening breeze. Every small gesture seemed magnified. The tilt of her head as she listened to a distant sound, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear without realizing it, the quiet rhythm of her breathing. I felt a tension in my chest, an ache that had been building for weeks, a longing I could no longer deny. We found a quiet bench beneath a street lamp, its soft light painting her profile in gentle gold. She sat first, and I hesitated before settling beside her, the distance between us charged with unspoken thoughts. My mind raced with what to say, but the words felt clumsy, inadequate to capture the intensity of what I felt. "You've been different lately," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine with a warmth that made my chest tighten. "I feel like there's something you're not telling me." Her words, simple as they were, gave me permission. Permission to speak the truth I had been holding inside, to articulate what I had kept restrained out of hesitation and fear. My fingers brushed hers as I reached for the courage I didn't feel, and the contact, fleeting as it was, sent a shiver through me. I think about you, more than I should," I admitted, voice low, uncertain but honest. "Every time we meet, every time I see you, it's like my chest tightens, and I can't think of anything else. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did, and I don't want to hide it anymore." She was silent for a moment, and I held my breath, fearing I had spoken too much, too soon. Then she leaned slightly closer, her shoulder brushing mine ever so lightly, her hand resting near mine without forcing contact. "I've noticed," she whispered, a soft, almost shy smile touching her lips. "I was hoping you would say something." The relief that washed over me was immediate and profound, but it was tempered by the tenderness of the moment. There was no rush, no urgency, only the quiet acknowledgement of feelings that had been simmering beneath the surface. Her proximity, the gentle warmth of her body near mine, the softness of her gaze. It was enough. It was everything. We didn't speak again for a while, content to let the unspoken emotions fill the space between us. Every glance, every subtle movement, every quiet breath became a conversation of its own. My hand hovered near hers, almost touching, savoring the anticipation, the closeness that didn't need words. That night, beneath the dim glow of the lamp, we shared our hearts without fear, without pretense. It was a confession not of urgency, but of honesty, a tender acknowledgement of the slow, undeniable pull that had grown between us. And in that delicate moment, I knew the bond we were forming was more than fleeting attraction. It was something rare, patient, and beautifully inevitable. The evening had settled into a calm that felt almost sacred. After weeks of chance encounters, quiet conversations, and stolen touches, we found ourselves together once more, this time without distraction, without the rush of a café or the fleeting encounter in the park. Her living room was bathed in the soft, golden light of a table lamp, the air warm and faintly scented with vanilla and lavender, familiar and comforting. We sat close on the couch, not because we had planned it, but because it felt natural. Our shoulders nearly touching, knees brushing occasionally, a quiet intimacy that needed no explanation. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, a steady presence that grounded me even as my heart raced with the realization of everything I had been feeling. We spoke softly, our conversation a gentle rhythm of laughter, shared stories, and lingering glances. There was no rush to label what had grown between us. It wasn't necessary. The connection we shared had always been patient, unfolding slowly, and tonight it felt complete in its own understated way. At one point, her hand rested near mine on the couch arm. I let mine hover, reluctant to break the delicate spell, then slowly closed the small gap, fingers brushing hers with a tenderness I had been longing to express. She didn't pull away. Instead, her hand curled slightly around mine, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. The warmth of her touch, light yet reassuring, sent a quiet thrill through me, a gentle confirmation that our feelings were mutual, real, and grounded in trust. We laughed softly at a story she told, her head leaning slightly against my shoulder. The weight of her presence was comforting, her cheek brushing my arm in a way that was intimate but completely natural. I could feel the steady rhythm of her breathing, the pulse of life close enough to remind me how alive I felt when we were together. There was a pause, a moment of quiet understanding. She looked up at me, eyes glimmering with unspoken emotion, and I felt the ache of longing resolve into something softer, warmer, something that resembled peace. I reached up gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and for a heartbeat, our eyes locked in silent acknowledgement of everything that had passed between us. Finally, she leaned in, resting her head lightly against my chest, and I wrapped my arms around her with a protective tenderness, careful not to rush, careful to let her feel the steadiness of my heartbeat against hers. In that embrace, everything that had been building, the anticipation, the hesitation, the unspoken words, settled into a quiet, unshakable certainty. We stayed like that for a long time, neither speaking nor needing to. The comfort of shared space, the warmth of touch, and the silent understanding between us said more than any words could. It was a love that had grown slowly, nurtured by patience, respect, and vulnerability, and it felt perfect in its quiet completeness. As the night deepened and the city outside hushed, I realized that this, her presence, her trust, the gentle intimacy we shared, was everything I had been searching for. And in the softness of that moment, I understood that some connections are not hurried, not forced, but meant to be savored, nurtured, and cherished. We were finally alone together and my heart could breathe. If you felt the slow burn of this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming age gap romances. Comment below. Have you ever experienced a connection that made your heart stop, even for a moment?